Well, folks, thank you so much. As more people join, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Genevieve Easterling. I will be your moderator today. I spent my career in customer experience, first through the nonprofit side of things, and then for about the last decade in the tech space. So I currently lead our customer success team here at GUIDEcx. We're an onboarding and project management software that really focuses on improving that customer experience through engagement. You can find me on LinkedIn if you're interested in connecting. Just for a couple of housekeeping items, we had a ton of registrations for this. So we should have a really active chat. And it tells me one big thing. You guys are all getting more pressure internally, pressure externally on how do we focus on goals and create firm metrics that equate to success with our customers. So Kristen will lead our discussion today. She's going to introduce tips and tricks to help discover, align, and make sure that you're set on a track to achieve those goals so that you can really focus on maintaining and strengthening your partnerships. We'd love to hear from you. So please, please, please put your comments in the chat. I'll be sure to moderate throughout, read them out. And if we get any questions we don't get a chance to answer today, we'll make sure that we have a follow-up. With that said, I'm thrilled to introduce you to our host, Kristen Hayer. Kristen is the founder and CEO of the Success League. Her passion for the customer success space is unmatched. It's truly contagious, and her advice is so practical. So I'm excited for you to be able to leave today with some key things that you can put into practice. Kristen, I'll let you take it from here.
Well, thank you so much. I've got some slides, so I'll share those. So just 1 minute, and I'll get that rolling. Um, but I'm excited to talk with all of you today about goal setting. Goal setting is such an important thing, and some companies are really good at it, but I will say most companies are not very good at it. When I was starting my career, just thought, I must keep picking bad companies. And I think what I've come to learn in having the Success League and having this company for about 10 years now and working with hundreds and hundreds of companies, I've just learned that most companies are not particularly great at setting goals. So, we're going to talk about two kinds of goal setting today. We're really going to talk about both setting goals for yourself and for your team. And we're going to talk about setting goals with your customers. So we'll talk about both of those things. Just briefly, if you don't know who I am or what my company does, I'm the founder of the Success League. We are a consulting and training firm that is focused on the field of customer success. I've spent my career building and leading customer success, account management, and sales at a variety of tech companies. And over the years, I've really helped companies create goal-driven strategies that help drive growth and retention and expansion. So a lot of what we put in place at the Success League really comes from my own experience in the field. So, what we'll talk about today is really why goal setting matters in customer success. We're going to talk about internal goal setting. So, how do you do this for yourself and your team? Even if you are on here and you're thinking, well, I'm not the leader of a team. I'm a CSM or I'm a CS professional. You can still set goals for yourself if they're not coming at you from somebody else, and I think you should. Um, you can create goals with customers as well, and so we'll spend some time talking about that. I'm a pretty casual presenter, so Genevieve, if you want to just feed me questions as they come in, we can even do it slide by slide, but I'll pause at certain points and ask if there's questions from the group.
That sounds great. I'm sure we'll have lots of
Okay.
activity today.
Yeah. So I wanted to start by just saying, when I was early in my career, I was in my first director role and I worked at a company where no one really set goals. We were a startup, and in those early days, we just sort of did the very best we could and tracked performance as we went. And for a while, that worked. But as we moved from that startup stage into the growth phase, I started to see the cracks in that process. Um, I felt disconnected from senior leadership. I knew my team was working really hard, but I had no structured way to really show the impact of our efforts. And around that same time, I was completing my MBA. And I had just taken a class on building business models. And so I thought, what if I applied those concepts to my team? So I built out a sales and customer success forecast, and I set some clear goals around that. And I wish I could say that senior leadership immediately appreciated my efforts, but the company was in a lot of transition at that point, and they had other priorities. But still, something really surprising happened. My team's results dramatically improved. we became more engaged, more focused, and we became more effective as a team. By the time I left that company, goal setting wasn't just something that I had introduced. It had actually become a big part of the team's culture. They expected it. They expected and appreciated the structure that it provided. And that experience taught me a really important lesson. I think even when leadership isn't fully aligned, setting strong goals can transform a team's performance. And so, what I hope you all leave thinking about today is what can you do either for yourself to set your own goals, to set goals for your team if you're a leader, um, and then to set goals with your customers because they can have kind of a magical impact. So that's my own story. I really want to dive into the very practical things that you can do. Um, but I want to start by talking about why this matters in customer success. So, companies with clear goals are 4 times more likely to be in the top quartile of their industry. So, if you've ever seen a, a, a Gartner report, you can see, there's a quartile that everyone wants to be in. Um, that tells us that goal setting really is not just a nice to have, it's a competitive advantage for companies. Companies that define clear priorities and align their teams around them perform at a significantly higher level than those who don't. Also, unfortunately, only 16% of frontline employees clearly understand their company's priorities. So this is kind of the reality of what I was seeing when I was out there and thinking like every company I worked for was a dud. Um, They aren't. It's just this is across the board.
Yeah.
It's a staggering number. It means that the vast majority of employees don't have a clear sense of what they should be focusing on.
I
And
love
then
it. For everybody out in the audience there, like great pulse check here. Raise your hand, use the little raise your hand if you have ever lacked visibility into team end metrics or company end metrics. Oh, those hands went up fast.
I feel like it should be everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is shocking that this happens, particularly since it's pretty well known that it's a good thing for companies and it does improve performance. Um, This is the obvious thing. People are 42% more likely to achieve goals when they write them down. This is true just in general for you personally if you have goals. They've studied this in a lot of different ways. I don't know about you, but I tend to over set goals around the new year every year. I don't know if you do that, Genevieve, but it is something that a lot of people do. And I do find that if I write the goals down, I am much more likely to focus on them, especially if I write them down and put them up somewhere where I can see them every day. That improves my likelihood of actually following through on those resolutions. But
Agreed. I tell everybody what I'm going to do just for the accountability factor.
yeah, yeah, it's so important. Um, so it's really good to have things written down. I think the big point that I want to make here is that managers who set those relevant goals boost the percentage of top performers on their teams from 44% to 60%. So not only is this helping the people who are already your performers perform better, this is helping you transition people from kind of average performance to top performance, which is huge. If you're a leader, that's a big jump and it can make the difference between hitting your company's performance objectives or not. And so these are the reasons why the metrics matter and goal setting matters. When you think about this internally, setting clear goals improves company and team performance. It improves employee engagement. It improves company and team alignment. It serves as a guide for your strategy, both for your company and your team. And it helps you demonstrate the value. If you're a CS leader, I want you to hear me when I say this. This is what helps you demonstrate the value that your CS team is bringing to your company. I know there have been, over the past few years, a lot of teams who have gotten laid off. And I think that a lot of why CS teams get laid off is because the value hasn't been demonstrated to a high enough level. It's not that the value wasn't there, it's that they weren't showing it in a concrete way. And so I want you to think about that. In terms of setting goals with customers, clear customer goals help drive customer engagement. They help align your company and your customers as partners. And it helps you demonstrate a clear return on investment that your customers are getting from your solution. So again, that helps to prevent churn. It encourages growth, all of that. Any questions on these stats before I move on? Do we have anything in the chat?
We don't have anything in the chat
Okay.
around this one, but couldn't agree more here. I think this is something I've struggled with throughout my career is how do I ask customers to define their goals? And when they don't know, how do I
hmm
make sure that I can leverage best practices to help them set those so we have clear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so important. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I'm going to start with internal goals. Um, these are just a set of things that could be goals for you. This is by no means a comprehensive list, but by role across a customer experience organization, these are some of the things that you could typically have as a goal. I think in customer success management, it's typically around revenue retention, expansion, turning customers into advocates. In onboarding, it's things like time to value or adoption or project efficiency. It's really about making sure the customers get up and running smoothly. Um, when it's support, it's things like response time and accuracy and customer satisfaction. It's such an important role. Support is critical. It's the yin to the customer success yang. And so, really for them though, it is all about speed and accuracy. And so the measures are a little different there. And then for services teams, it could be around margin or product usage or project efficiency, those kinds of measures. Finally, account management, it's typically around pipeline or time to close or close ratio. Those numbers look a lot like a sales team's numbers would look. So those are the kind of goals that we see across these teams. I think the key takeaway here is that every team inside of a customer success organization should have goals that align with customer success and revenue growth because those are things that the company needs from a customer success team, but they may have smaller pieces of it that are relevant to their specific role. So as you're thinking about setting goals, you want to consider both of those pieces. We're going to talk about how in a second.
And
Any
I'd love from the audience if you can share some examples in the chat about internal goals you've set on your own team. Would love to see how those shape up.
Yeah. Do you want to share those as I keep going?
I'll
If you
drop
see
them in
them.
here and I think will be great to
Okay.
consolidate out for our follow-up. I'll definitely share any that are relevant to the chats
Okay. Perfect.
in the slides.
All right. So I want to talk about how to set a goal. So now that we've talked about why is it important, how do you break it down? Um, Goal setting isn't just about writing down targets. You really want to create kind of a framework that helps your team's effort um, show up in the bigger business. So this slide is really a kind of a three-step process for how to make the goal setting happen. So the first thing is you really want to start with the team's mission. So what is your group doing? What does your team need to do to align with the company's business objectives? So your mission is the why behind the team's work here. So what are you doing? For example, a customer success team's mission might be to drive customer retention and expansion, while a support team's mission could focus on delivering fast and effective solutions to drive customer satisfaction. So whatever it is, you want to make sure you're very clear on what is the overarching objective of what you're trying to do. And then you want to identify the metrics that go along with that. So once you have a mission, you need metrics that measure your progress. And this is where the rubber hits the road. So you really want to think about the key metrics that drive the goals that you're trying to achieve in a broader way. So, for example, you might have a goal around increasing customer retention. Your metrics might include things like renewal rates, scores, product adoption trends. If you're in onboarding, you might track time to value or implementation success rates. And those things are all there in support of customer retention. So you want to think, okay, customer retention, but then how does that actually play out in the role itself? The key here is to really focus on meaningful data, not vanity metrics. So a lot of times there are, and what a vanity metric is just a metric that's there to look good. And I think this happens a lot. I see this across support teams a lot, where, you know, response time or time to first response becomes something that is just expected to have as a part of the goals. But once you get in a good habit as a team of picking up the phone or picking up the chat and doing it in a reasonable time frame, it's not a meaningful metric anymore. What's really meaningful to the customer is a resolution time. Like, how quickly did it take to get from, that phone being picked up to your issue being resolved? So over time, sometimes what started out as an important goal turns into a vanity metric. And so every once in a while, you want to just kind of comb through and really be honest with yourself about, is this metric or is this goal still meaningful to our team? And then finally, from there, once you know the metrics you need to measure, you set SMART goals. And this is scary for people who have never done this before. Um, it is putting a stake in the ground and creating a true forecast of the behavior that you expect from your team and the performance that you expect from your team. So a lot of people know what SMART goals are. If you don't feel bad. And if you want more of a description on this, this is all over the internet. You could just Google it and you'll see what it's all about. But it is an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So for example, instead of saying we want to improve customer retention, which is super broad, you want to say something and set a goal like, we want to increase customer retention from 85% to 90% over the next 12 months by improving onboarding completion rates and expanding proactive check-ins. So that takes that from really broad general thing that of course every company wants to something that is very specific and realistic for you, for your team. So when team goals are aligned with company objectives and they're backed by things that you can measure and structured like a SMART goal, it really drives results. And so this is how you can kind of just take that broad thing and break it down into something that you can actually try to achieve together and set a goal on for yourself or for your team.
I love it. We have a great example in the chat from Amy. Amy says, I manage training, internal and external clients. Our big audacious goal for 2024 was to create great webinars that replaced us and left us readily available to support where a trainer was truly needed. Example, like to train on best practices. I would love, Kristen, your take on, hey, how do I turn this into a SMART goal?
Yeah. So what was remind me again, what was
So
the objective?
Amy's in charge of training. So
Okay.
they
Yeah.
are essentially trying to take all of the trainings that they've done in person and now turn them into webinars. So then they leave their trainers for places where they really do need one-on-one training.
Yeah. Okay. So the way that I might break that down, because that is a very broad, big goal, is to start by saying, okay, how many of those have you been delivering over the past year in person? I would start there. And I would say, has the trend been going down? Has it been going up? Take a look at the trend for the last year as well. And then I might say, okay, so, we're not going to do this all at once. We're going to do this over the course of the year. So how can we go from, let's say it was 100 webinars a quarter that you were doing, and take that down to 0 at the end of the year. And so you can kind of break it down. And so you might say, okay, well, in the first quarter of the year, let's get it down to 75. And then in the second quarter of the year, let's get it down to 50. And you can just kind of evenly split it. Or if there was maybe some seasonality around your business and those things happen, differently throughout the year, you might want to make that breakdown a little different to correspond with that. But basically what you're doing is you're saying, okay, our goal as of Q1 is to get it from 100 to 75 or whatever you think is a, challenging but achievable goal. That's turning that into a SMART goal because it is specific. You're looking at a specific metric. It is measurable because it's a number of them. It's achievable. Hopefully you chose a I just was guessing. So you choose a goal that's reasonable to you. Relevant. So make sure that it is connected to something that matters to the company. So I think that's a cost reduction move. It's also getting rid of an opportunity cost. You're not doing other things because you're doing those classes in person. So Think about both of those things, and it is time bound. You just do it quarter by quarter by quarter and get rid of it. So anyway, I hope that's a good breakdown. Do you want to add anything, Genevieve?
No, I was gonna say we did something similar on our side. We found ourselves doing all these custom trainings,
Hmm.
and every custom training was essentially the same training. And so we said, hey, let's
Yeah.
utilize the great content we've created and then allow our trainers to get hyper focused on specific needs. And it did. It tremendously saved on the cost, but also helped
Hmm.
us create more ROI, expansion and retention opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's great.
I've had a couple of people ask, and I'm sorry if I missed this. We will be sending out a recording, so if you have to drop, we'll send out the full recording at the end of the session.
Cool. All right. So then what you want to do is you've got your team goal. Let's say your team goal was exactly what we just talked about. You're trying to reduce the number of things you're teaching in person. Great. What does that mean for a team of, say, 5 people? How many should they be shooting for on an individual basis? So maybe, let's say you have a team of 5. Let's say you want to go from 100 down to 75 during Q1 of the year. So 75 divided by 5, 15 per person. Okay. So this is why the calculator sits here. I'm not good at doing math in my head. But so your goal then for the individuals on the team would be, okay, nobody teaches in person more than 15. That's your limit. And that's your goal. So you just kind of take the big team goal, break it down by person. Ideally, you want to have the same goal per person. Sometimes teams are a little unbalanced in terms of the number of customers that each person takes care of. So you can adjust for that if you need to. But it creates buy-in and it creates teamwork when the goals are the same across the whole team. So keep that in mind. Um, and goals should be based on results, not effort. Um, so effort is great. And what I will say is sometimes to get a team into good habits, you might want to have a contest or something that rewards the activity and the effort they're making. But once you have the activity down and the effort is being made, the effort should be assumed and the results should speak for themselves. So you want to be measuring the results. If really formal goal setting is new to your team, I think it would be good to review goals throughout the quarter or throughout the year in the one-on-one meetings just to make sure that there's alignment and that people are understanding the activity they need to do to hit their goals. So that should be a part of those management conversations that you're having. And if you're just doing this for yourself, that's okay. If you're sitting here and you're like, well, I'm just one CSM. Yeah, you can set goals for yourself and then you're your own manager. So just review those every so often. Um, and that will help you stay aligned.
Love it.
So I want to transition into talking about setting goals with your customers now.
Oh, this
So
is my favorite part.
so before I do that, are there any questions about goal setting for yourself or for your team that we need to tackle?
We had a couple of goals or a couple of questions that came through with the registrations. So one is how can I develop an effective action plan for success with enterprise clients, multiple stakeholders and many layers. So they've got management, they've got technical side.
Okay, so this is on the customer side for goal setting with your customers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I'll make sure I talk about that.
Perfect. And then I think the other one that came through was any tips for companies with a small number of high value B2B customers. So if we can hit on kind of those topics as we go
Okay.
through, that would be great.
Yeah. They kind of dovetail a little bit. So I'll definitely get into that. So okay, so far we focused on setting internal goals. The process is the same for setting goals with customers, but there's some nuances, so I want to make sure I talk about those. Um, to drive long-term customer success, you need to set goals with your customers. And I want to say with your customers. You're not setting goals for your customers. This is a project that you take on together. Customer goals are different from internal goals in one key way, and that is that they evolve over time along with the life cycle of your customer. So, customer needs and expectations are really different in the first few months than they are down the road in years 2, 3, and so on. So, you need to adapt your approach to goal setting a little bit around the maturity of the customer. So this slide outlines 4 key stages of customer maturity. There's the new customer. This is when customers are really wanting to set very tactical product focused goals typically because they're trying to get through onboarding. They want to see initial value from your solution. They want to know they made the right purchasing decision. They want to know that your solution is going to solve the problems that were on their mind when they made the buying decision. So, the goals at this stage are things like completing implementation on time, achieving some early adoption milestones, resolving any onboarding roadblocks, those things. They're very in the weeds and tactical. As you go into year one, you're kind of transitioning into a growth phase with that customer and they're fully onboarded, the conversation then can shift toward longer term success and growth. So, this is where goals might include things like you complete an initial success plan with them, you identify the next phase of growth opportunities with that customer, or you think about the KPIs that they want to use to measure the long term impact your solution is going to have for them. Then, once you get to years 2 and plus, you can start to think about strategic business goals. So this is where it gets fun for me. They get to a place where okay, they know how to use your solution, but your job now is to challenge them to think bigger about it. So are there pieces of your offering that they haven't adopted yet? Are there new divisions or departments in the company that you could help move into? Lots of things can be done at this stage, and it helps to really think creatively about your customer's business at this point and start to map their business and their objectives to your solutions that you have to offer. So, key goals here might look at driving company wide adoption of features will make them sticky, or achieving measurable ROI tied to the product in some way, or implementing advanced integrations or automation or things like that. So these turn into bigger objectives. And then finally, there's the stage of customers who you want to be advocates for you. So these are your most mature customers, and they're not just achieving success with your product, they're actively shaping the future of your business. Um, and they should be considered partners with you. So this is where you can share success stories. You could have goals around them providing feedback for future product development or ask them to be a reference for you. So here, when they're at that phase, you want to think about not just how can you help each other around the solution itself, but how can you help them get exposure for their business? And how can that help you and your business? And so, as you can see, as you go along, it starts off being tactical and very product driven. And over time, it shifts to things that are strategic and more business focused. And so a one size fits all approach doesn't tend to work with customers at every single phase in their customer journey with you. You need to be a little bit flexible and consider where they are in the life cycle as you're setting goals with them. Did any questions surface around this?
Not specific around this.
Okay. Okay, great. So, along with that, I'll answer the 2 questions that you brought up earlier. So, how do you set goals in a bigger, more matrix style company? And I think the answer is you set goals with people, not with companies. So, um, if you've got maybe you're a CSM who has just one very large customer, those exist. Maybe what you do is you sort of look at each of the individuals that you're working with inside of that company as a little mini company or a little mini account, and you just work with them. Now, your job is then to pull it all together and be paying attention to the big picture of goal setting and making sure that, you know, the individual tactical goals um, roll up into the strategic business goals that you might be getting from, say, a senior executive in the company. But you do want to, um, it's okay to have goals with different people. So that's how I would answer that question, that first question. What was the second one again? It was about,
So the second one is similar here, but for companies that have kind of a small number of high value B2B
oh
customers.
yeah.
what recommendations do we have? So I think some key learnings from your last point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the lucky you, if that's you, you get to have more time to spend thinking about your customers' businesses and helping to spur their thinking and frankly challenge them a little to think differently and bigger about your offering and have more of these strategic discussions. I think when you've got 100 customers that you're managing, it can be really hard to have the kind of conversations all the time that you need to have in order to be good at goal setting. But if you've got a handful of really big customers, then you've got time. And with that time, I would say spend time researching their company. I just taught a class this morning where we went through an exercise of doing this, and I think there's a great tool. It's very widely available. It's called the Business Model Canvas. And you can go download that. You can just Google it and download it. And you can use that as a framework for how to think about how your customer goes to market. And we used the example this morning in class of Gap Incorporated. So if you're from the US and probably North America, I think Gap operates mostly in those markets, but it's a clothing company. And so they have cute casual clothes. They've been around since the 70s, and um, they sell through the brands Gap, Old Navy,
Athleta,
Banana,
Banana
yeah, Athleta
Republic.
and Banana Republic. Those are their brands. So, we started talking. I'm like, well, I was asking the group, how does Gap what does Gap do? And they're like, they make clothes. I'm like, okay, let's all go to the Gap website. And if you go to the Gap website, what you find is, yes, they make clothes, but they also have a whole lot of giving back initiatives that they do. They also have a lot of environmental initiatives around the manufacturing of their clothing. They also have things that they do around um, uniforms for school children and things like that. So there's a broader set of things they do. And then we talked about where do they get their money from? And everybody was like, the stores. I'm like, yes, but where else can you buy Gap clothes? They're like, oh, the website. I'm like, yes. So, as you start to think about the business, if Gap was one of your customers and you had an offering, a tech offering for them, if you forgot about the fact that there was a whole website part of what they do, you'd be missing out on half of what you could do with that company, if not more. And you'd be missing out on how they're operating in all of these other countries, and they're concerned about the environment in those companies and the environmental impact of their manufacturing practices. And as you start to kind of pick away at what's going on at Gap, you realize it's this massive company with a lot of different things going on. It took us literally 5 minutes to do that research and just getting on the website and digging around. It is really simple to do enough homework to start to come up with ideas for your customers if you just take the time to do it. And so I think that's what I would encourage people to do who have that small group of bigger companies is just go do your homework on that company and use the business model canvas to think about all the angles, and it will spur your creativity and get you having more interesting goal setting conversations with your clients.
Oh, I think so spot on. Just asking more questions, helping to make sure that you've done your research so that you can prove out and ask those questions. It's so critical. Priya asked a great question here. So, love the idea of setting tons of goals across various stakeholders and across various timelines. How do I actually track these consistently and effectively?
Well, it kind of depends on what you've got to work with. I think at a very basic level, spreadsheets work great. If you want to get a little more creative, you can do Smartsheet or you could do Monday or a tool like that, and that can help, you know, tamp down the complexity a little bit. But honestly, spreadsheets are very easy to use and you can keep it pretty simple. You don't have to do anything big. Um, there are lots of great tools out there that have places where you can track goals. Um, I'm GUIDEcx probably one of them. There are other CS platforms that you might be on. There might be CRM system that you're on. Start with what you've got to work with first and see what you've got. And then, if you're doing this a lot or it's becoming cumbersome for you, look for other tooling. But I think for the most part, if I'm tracking goals, I'm usually doing it on a spreadsheet. To be
Yeah.
honest, I think you can keep it pretty simple.
Yeah, yeah, we will talk to as part of our opportunity close process.
Hmm.
Our salespeople have to always input what are the specific goals of our
Hmm.
customers. Those then get passed into GUIDEcx. So we do track these here.
Yeah.
Allows our onboarding team to chat through those and say, hey, has anything changed? And sometimes you're
Hmm.
dealing with different stakeholders. So reiterating what are those goals and then refining even deeper. And then our customer success team has a way head start by the time that they get passed on that customer to say, hey, this is what's been processed, this is what I'm planning to tracking, and these are the ways we'll do it. Anything else that we can add in here? Mark Mitchell asked a great question that I think I'm going to tweak the question a little bit. Mark, you're my bestie. You know I can tweak it. So he asks, some questions can put pressure. Some clients can put pressure or expectations on vendors that are irrational. How do we manage expectations without inadvertently creating buyer's remorse? And I think this is a great one to tie back to goals.
Yes, so this is an excellent segue into my next slide, actually. So, similar to the answer that I gave back when we were talking about individual goals, I think there's a process you can go through with your customers that helps prevent unrealistic goals. And it's this. And the keys here are number 2 and 3 on this list. It is important to outline the expected outcome. So have the conversation with your customer up front about what their objectives are. Some customers, it's like pulling teeth to try to get 2 goals from them or 2 objectives from them. Other customers are going to give you a laundry list of things they're hoping for. If you have one of those laundry list customers, what you can do is say, okay, for now, for starters, let's start with your top 2 to 5. So tell me of this big list, which ones here are the most critical for you, and really zero in on those top 2 to 5. That will help keep it from being overwhelming. I mean, I don't know if you've ever done this, but I have had New Year's Eves where I've set like 10 goals for the coming year. None of those ever get done because I set too many goals and it was too overwhelming and I got frustrated and quit. 2 to 5 is about how much you can actually reasonably handle in a period of time with a single person that you're doing this with. So have them narrow it down. The other thing, though, is make sure you understand the baseline metric. Where are they today? How are they measuring this thing that they want today? And where does it sit today? And then also, what happened over the last year? Because once you know those 2 things, you'll know what is realistic, right? You can't go from, closing 2 deals to closing 1,000 deals when the historical, trend has been, you know, a variation of like 1 to 2. That is a super unreasonable expectation. How would you know that? Well, you know that because if you know where they are today and what the history has looked like, then you can kind of anchor them in the idea of what is realistic in terms of driving change. And the other thing you could do, and I'll tell you about this a little more in a minute, is if you don't know how much change you can drive, you can set a short-term goal, evaluate the results, and then set a longer term goal based on whatever it is you were able to achieve. So those baseline pieces are how you help to prevent unrealistic expectations, I think.
Yeah.
The other things you do here are just choose a time period. So think about what is a reasonable period of time to measure something. Sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's a quarter. I I kind of like to lean away from it being an annual objective unless there's some milestones in the middle, but you want to choose something that makes sense for what you're trying to measure. And then again, SMART goals.
Yeah. Mike Smith asked a great question that kind of aligns with this. Are there
Okay.
pros and cons, pros or cons to having
Hmm.
individual goals and results public to the whole team?
Oh, you mean kind of internal goals?
Yeah, well, internal, but sort of achievement goals.
Yeah, so it depends on the kind of goal that it is and how reasonable the goal is or if it's a stretch goal. I think if it's a very personal goal for an individual, I wouldn't expose that. Sometimes when I'm goal setting with individual team members, we might have a goal around something that is for improving their career path or whatever. But for team goals, I lean toward having them be public and having the results be public. Um, it's kind of that leaderboard idea of having performance in front of everybody. I like to do that because I like to lead high performing teams, and I think high performing teams have their goals top of mind all the time. And I think it keeps those goals top of mind to have results out there in front of everybody. I think it also can encourage people's competitive spirit. Some types of teams get really grouchy about that or nervous about that or feel like it's unfair. I think the cons are if you have goals that because of whatever reason, maybe your customer counts are imbalanced across your team, or one person on your team, has to handle a different kind of customer than everybody else, then you might not want to post them because it may feel unfair just because of the way that things are imbalanced in your group. Um, I think the other time people really complain is when um, when it's something they don't fully control, like customer feedback, it can be really frustrating to have a leaderboard where, you know that a couple of customers randomly got grumpy about your support tickets, and then now you have a score that's way lower than everybody else's that's out there because you don't have full control of what customers are going to say. And so those are the things I would be thinking about. It's okay to have a team if a team has not had strong goals in the past and this is a new thing you're doing and you're doing some sort of visible goal setting and performance measurement. It's okay that they're uncomfortable with that for a period of time and you just have to kind of lead through it. But I do want to say I think be sensitive about certain kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the big key point in there is achievable goals. So nobody
Hmm.
wants to have theirs forecast if there's no chance that they're going to hit them. But as
Yeah,
long as you're setting realistic expectations, then you should be able to hold teams to a standard and help celebrate those wins.
yeah. It starts to get fun after people get used to it, I think. And
Definitely.
I do think I'm a huge fan of contests. I think contests tied to goals make it all a lot lighter and more fun and sort of less punitive feeling. So, as you're getting a new team used to having goals that are public, have a contest around it. Have
Definitely.
prizes, and that can help.
And we have flown through our time today.
Oh
So
my gosh, are we already at time?
we're at the final moment. So I would say,
Oh my
Kristen, hit
gosh.
us with our key takeaways. And
Okay.
then for the group, we'll make sure that we are sending out this recording afterwards. If we have any follow-up questions, Kristen and I are happy to answer them. And if you've got any final questions you want to sneak in, go ahead and throw them in the chat. I think Kristen and I can hang for a few more minutes.
Okay, so just really quickly, this is an example of a goal plan. This will be in the slides that you get after the session or the recording that you get after the session. But here, really what I want to say is this is what it looks like when you put it all together. And there's three examples here. The first example is a typical one. The second example is an example of setting a short-term goal and then having a long-term goal based on the results of the short-term goal. And the third one is how do you measure something soft, like a company reputation or something like that? And so it's really kind of figuring out how to have a proxy for that is a metric for that thing. So in this case, CSAT score is really a proxy for your company reputation. And so consider that. Um, our company does training. We do lots and lots of training classes for leaders, for CSMs. We have a accredited CSM certification program. So if you're looking for more of what you heard today, you can find us at thesuccessleague.io, and you can also just reach out to me individually. We do corporate training, private training, and public training.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody. Are there any questions that cropped up?
No questions in the chat. So if there's
Okay.
a final question, throw them in there. But I think people are starting to drop off. We'll hang on the
Thanks,
line for a few
everybody.
more minutes, and then yeah, let us know if you've got any questions that we didn't get a chance to get to.